This portion of the news brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
The government has reaffirmed its commitment to the continued advancement of the disabled community here at home with the recent signing of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Well, at the high-level meeting in New York on September 24th, which focused on the realization of the Millennium Development Goals for persons with disabilities, Minister of Social Services and Community Development, the Honorable Melanie Griffin signed on to the treaty on behalf of the government and people of the Bahamas.
The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, became the 157th country to sign on to that convention. And this convention was adopted on the 13th of December 2006 and opened for signature on the 30th of March 2007. It was truly a proud day for the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. The community of persons with disabilities is extremely pleased that their country has now, through this small yet significant action, made a commitment to them. The signing of this convention was one of the commitments set out in our party's Charter for Governance, which has now been fulfilled. I will shortly...
Since the 9th annual actuarial review of the National Insurance Board, its 2012 annual report was released. It was released Wednesday, and the findings have received some negative commentary. So much so, the Labor Minister and National Insurance Minister says he feels compelled to address certain aspects, like NIB's investment with the government.
During my tenure as Minister responsible for NIB, both under the previous administration and this current administration, government-directed investment proposals were and are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and only those which satisfy the board's investment policy guidelines are approved. And I have to add that historically, investments in government securities and properties have benefited the National Insurance Fund, particularly, Mr. Speaker, during the recent global economic downturn. And further, the NIB has long recognized the need to diversify the fund's investment portfolio. The objective to reduce the allocation from the Bahamas government instruments to more offshore investments continue to be included in the organization's strategic plans.
Now, the actuarial review covers the period January 1st, 2007 through December 31st, 2011. And Minister Gibson says the important governance requirements in the legislation surrounding the National Drug Prescription Plan were not activated.
The same act mandated that the first actuarial review of the Prescription Drug Fund should have occurred as at December 31st, 2011. And no preparations were made by the former administration to meet either of these obligations. Compounding this governance deficit is the fact that the Prescription Drug Fund Act surprisingly makes no provisions for statutory audits or for annual reports relating to the operation of the fund. It may well be that the architects of the plan assumed that these important controls would be subsumed within the processes and requirements of the National Insurance Act. But it appears that the legal mechanisms to ensure this were not provided for.
Well, it's a bill that will bring Her Majesty's prison into the 21st century. The details of the Corrections Service Bill 2013, debated in the House of Assembly Wednesday evening, was brought to Parliament by Minister of National Security and Member for Baines and Grantstown, Dr. Bernard Nottage. The Correctional Services Bill 2013 will change the name of the prison, reflecting the government's rehabilitative plan, and to govern the operations of Her Majesty's prison. Dr. Bernard Nottage explained that this new bill will replace the Prison Act, which has been in existence for some 70 years. The government says it will be using timely recommendations from the Bahamas Prison Reform Commission, which was formed under the previous Christie administration.
Part 4 of the bill makes provision for a Correctional Services Review Board. This board will have the functions of keeping the prison under review constantly and to advise the minister on all aspects of correctional facilities, to visit and inspect at least once every quarter whatever correctional facilities we have, and to be the watchdog, if you like, for the public or for the minister.
Foreign Affairs Minister and Fox Hill MP Fred Mitchell, in his contribution, told members that he came into politics to fight for the rights of people and improve their way of life. One of the things he focused on was the condition at the prison. Over the years, Minister Mitchell says he's had the opportunity to visit other prisons around the world and that the Bahamas is light years behind in upgrading our correction system.
If you have bad conditions for the inmates, you also have bad conditions for the guards. The inmates and the guards are not separable in that sense. So any inhumanity that you're imposing on the inmates, you also impose on the guards. And the guards have done nothing wrong. So why should we impose the inhumanity on them?
Member for Seabreeze Hope Strawn has outlined the national security plan in the Progressive Liberal Party's Charter for Governance. And so far, Strawn says the government has been on track with putting these measures in place.
The national crime agenda, which is being followed, is addressing crime from a multi-headed perspective. We see, Mr. Speaker, at page 156, it talks about the crime management agenda of the PLP, incorporating 4 major modules: effective crime prevention, effective crime detection, effective crime prosecution, and effective rehabilitation. I call it the 4 E's.
Leader of the opposition and Killarney MP, Dr. Hubert Minnis, in his contribution Wednesday night, spoke about the former administration's goal of using telemedicine. He says this is still something that should be considered.
The facilities themselves, Mr. Speaker, we had done quite a lot for the facilities when we were in. We thought it was problematic seeing the prison bus traveling back and forth, obstructing traffic. We thought it was somewhat problematic, and it's not a beautiful scene when you go sometime into the hospital and a prisoner with 1 or 2 overseers sitting in the emergency room or waiting within the hospital confines, waiting to see a specialist or waiting to see a physician. And invariably, in many instances, because of who they are, and we may not necessarily admit it, but because of who they are, they may be placed at the end of the list.
Well, member for East Grand Bahama, Peter Turnquest, in his contribution, gave the government recommendations on how to deal with various issues, including alternative sentencing for relatively minor offenses.
The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that our prison is scandalously overcrowded. And it is time for us to give serious consideration to alternatives. Alternative sentencing may be one way, such as mandatory community service, restitution, anger management, drug and parenting counseling, all of these in place of actual custodial sentence. Why should we participate in destroying the life of some young person because they may have been caught with a joint or some relatively minor offense?
Also to come in the Bahamas tonight, how sports and Cuba mix. You're watching the Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news was brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
This is your Royal Fidelity Business News. I'm Jimenita Swain. Financial Services Minister Ryan Pinder said the Bahamas continues to excel in developing human capital and professionals in compliance. And as such, he said the ministry has looked at developing opportunities for entrepreneurs in that area. Mr. Pinder said that defining the framework for professional compliance outsourcing by the Securities Commission of the Bahamas is a step in the right direction. His comments came during the Higgs and Johnson annual client seminar held at the Sheraton Nassau Beach Resort. In other business news, cultivating the climate to produce a sustainable market for small, medium, and micro businesses is the government's response to stimulating the local economy. Small business consultant Mark Turnquest said SMEs are closer now to receiving national and international funding and the necessary business support systems that will make businesses sustainable. Government has engaged consultants to assess the needs of small, medium enterprises in the country. Turnquest is addressing a business workshop with Pinewood residents on the benefits of business consultancy. And in international business news, a tweet caused a stir among oil traders this morning. Reuters is reporting that oil traders focused on signs of escalating violence in the Middle East, but they were jolted by a Twitter posting from the Israeli military that at first glance suggested that they just bombed Syrian airports. Oil prices jumped $1 as the talk raced through oil markets. The tweet was true, but it wasn't news. The posting referred to an attack 40 years ago in the Yom Kippur War, the latest in a series of tweets from the Israeli Defense Forces Twitter handle commemorating the war. That was your Royal Fidelity Business News. I'm Jimenita Swain.